Recently, Microsoft announced layoffs of about 6,000 to 7,000 employees. If you look closely at the details of Microsoft's restructuring, it's primarily middle managers who have been laid off. This move is about reducing personnel whose roles have become redundant or unnecessary when working alongside AI agents. This is about compressing the organizational structure. Middle managers, whose main function was to relay tasks from upper management downwards and report results upwards, are becoming obsolete. Consequently, CEOs and company leaders are now compelled to ask, is this person truly essential?
Yes, hello. This is reporter Hong Jae from Tea Times. Today I'll be interviewing Professor Lee Joong-hak. Welcome, Professor.
A pleasure to be here.
When discussing books, the first question is usually, why did you write this book? But I'd like to take a slightly different approach. This might be a bit of a spoiler, but towards the end of your book, you state, in the future, those who collaborate with artificial intelligence will survive, while those who don't will be left behind. Aren't we actually seeing this happen in reality these days?
Yes, that's correct. Microsoft recently announced a large-scale restructuring with layoffs affecting 6,000 to 7,000 employees. Furthermore, major layoffs are anticipated at other companies like Meta and Google. Historically, Microsoft was known for its stability and rarity of layoffs. For such a company to announce sudden layoffs of this magnitude indicates that AI is genuinely entering our organizations and transforming work and how it's done. This AI-driven restructuring, or the integration of AI into work processes, is happening on a very large scale and quite abruptly, creating a rather unsettled atmosphere.
The CEO of Shopify also made a statement implying that those who don't work with AI will be the first to be let go. Similar occurrences are becoming common both domestically and internationally, aren't they?
For instance, if you look at Indeed, the largest job site in the US, the number of job postings has been consistently decreasing since the advent of generative AI. This serves as evidence that human labor is, to some extent, becoming less necessary or is being replaced. Besides Shopify and Duolingo, many other domestic and international companies, though not widely publicized, have already initiated related transformations. As I'm also grappling with these issues, I share some of those concerns. The critical question we need to answer is, how will we adapt to this? This is a major challenge and a pressing matter for consideration.
I read an article recently about the existing trend of leveraging SaaS for workforce efficiency, and now it seems SaaS itself is readily replaceable by AI agents. Is that correct?
There are discussions about the SaaS market itself being potentially replaced by AI agents. Furthermore, you might have seen articles related to Apple's Safari. Considering that Safari's search volume has, for the first time ever, reportedly surpassed Google's in some contexts, it's clear that the way we perform various tasks like searching, managing information, and analyzing data is significantly changing due to AI agents or AI itself. The moment these elements are introduced into organizations, company CEOs and leaders seem to begin genuinely contemplating, do we really need human employees for this?
You also wrote that in Korea's case, there's an opposite implication, meaning because the working age population is shrinking, it creates a more favorable environment for AI adoption. Is that right?
I've heard there are over 300 universities in South Korea. By 2030, that number could significantly decrease, and by 2040, it could even be halved, and it would be acceptable given demographic trends. A decreasing student population means a reduction in the total pool of people companies can hire. When there's a shortage of actual workers, many consider immigration policies or extending the retirement age, but these aren't easy solutions. Inevitably, we'll likely need to adopt technology or integrate AI agents into organizations to fill the labor shortage. If so, enhancing the quality of human capital seems to be the most realistic countermeasure for our organizations currently. And perhaps the easiest and fastest way to boost that productivity is by leveraging AI agents for collaboration. Recently, a major Korean conglomerate also announced the creation of a dedicated team to prepare for working with AI agents. However, this is a move that US companies have already been making. Well-known companies, let's call them Company A and Company G, already have AI agents integrated into their workflows, assisting employees and facilitating collaboration. Therefore, I believe this phenomenon is not just coming, it's already here and happening.
Just one more question. There's an interesting point here worth discussing, the distinction between fake work and real work. Is AI also needed in that aspect?
In reality, a significant portion of the work we do often consists of hours spent on tasks that are meaningless or don't generate value. However, if you work alongside an AI agent, there's no room left for this fake work to hide. According to an experiment by the Hankook Ilbo, Korean office workers spend an average of about 2.5 hours a day on fake work. While it's hard to generalize, I admit I also engaged in a lot of fake work when I was an employee. The reason I call it fake work is that typical examples include dressing up reports or reporting for the sake of reporting. For instance, aimless meetings among employees. This kind of fake work surprisingly takes up a lot of time in organizations. If you're working with an AI agent, you can't really do that kind of fake work. It really makes you reflect. A common activity I've been encouraging recently is to have individuals list all the tasks they performed over the past month, along with the purpose of each task, the outcome, and how much time it took. When they write it all down, it often becomes an opportunity to realize that a surprising amount of time was spent on meaningless tasks or fake work. There are also more areas than expected that can be automated. This activity actually allows you to reflect on when and how you invested your time and what actual value you created. However, people often find it difficult. The reason I'm saying this is that, surprisingly often, we don't have the time or mental space in organizations to ask ourselves, why am I doing this work? Typically, we just do the work that's assigned. In Seth Godin's book, This is Marketing, often discussed in terms of finding meaning, there's a concept that people can be divided into two types: those who primarily do given work, and those who, even with assigned tasks, find their own meaning or define the value of that work themselves. From that perspective, people who define and create their own work rather than just doing given work tend to have better engagement and produce better results. I believe this is even more crucial in the AI era. Those who have long been accustomed to given work struggle to define tasks for themselves when an AI agent comes in and they're told, now, let's work together. They've always done what the organization told them to do, allocating their time accordingly. But when an AI agent starts proactively assigning tasks, giving feedback, and expecting communication, they find it very challenging. Therefore, the ability to design and define one's own work is surprisingly important. Our viewers might not be like this, but many people find this incredibly difficult.
People who design and define work are often the ones who assign tasks to those who execute them, forming a team. But since AI can now take on that execution role, does this mean that those who primarily received and executed tasks will be the first to be replaced?
That's an excellent way to put it. In my previous book, The Future of Work Seen Through Data and Cases, I used the phrase, everyone becomes a boss. It's interesting because a recent prominent study released by Microsoft uses almost the exact same expression. Everyone becomes an agent boss. So I'd like to think I was a bit ahead of Microsoft on that one. Ultimately, every employee needs to be able to manage team members or followers and delegate work. This means they must be able to define and articulate the purpose of the work, its goals, how to measure outcomes, and where the value comes from. Or they need to be able to give feedback and communicate with their agents, though we don't use the term subordinates much these days. However, many are not prepared for this. That's why, if you look closely at Microsoft's recent restructuring, they use the term flattened organization. Simply put, it means compressing the organizational structure. Unlike the past, there aren't many layers, so to speak. Now, traditional middle managers, those who interpreted tasks from above and passed them down, or collected work from below and reported it upwards, are becoming less necessary. So, if you examine the Microsoft restructuring closely, while some roles were eliminated due to their nature, a significant portion of the layoffs involved these middle managers. They reduced layers. It wasn't about reducing headcount simply because people weren't needed, but rather eliminating roles that became redundant or unnecessary when working with AI agents. That's why organizations are said to be slimming down these days. They're reducing this vertical structure. Then, and I apologize for putting it this way, those middle managers whose role was simply to relay, delegate, and mechanically process tasks are no longer needed.
If you gave them AI tools and asked them to do the work, they might do well.
Exactly. Their roles also need to be redistributed. This highlights a difference between the US and Korea. Layoffs are relatively easier in the US, but not so in Korea. That's why one of the biggest concerns for HR departments in many Korean organizations today is team leaders who have been removed from their positions. In Korea, there's still a tendency for both team members and individuals themselves to prefer older or more experienced people as team leaders. When these individuals step down from team leader positions, it's difficult to lay them off. Figuring out what work to assign them is a major challenge. From that perspective, discussions around job transition, reskilling, and working with AI agents are becoming more prevalent.
Regarding what you just said, I recall an insightful interview with Kwak Yun-bong, CEO of Otran Labs, who previously appeared on this show. He mentioned exactly that. 2 points from his discussion resonated with me. First, Mr. Kwak said that when working with AI, they maintain a very short feedback cycle. It's not like tasks take a long time anymore, and pondering for extended periods doesn't necessarily guarantee quality. So they quickly discuss feedback within a couple of hours, or 3 at most, give feedback, and then move in the next direction. That was one aspect, breaking down work into much smaller time segments. Another point he made was the need to reduce communication costs. What you're describing now, if an organization had multiple layers, compressing them effectively reduces communication costs, right? Is this becoming a global trend?
It's already heading in that direction. I think there are a couple more factors. One of the key drivers for reducing communication costs is that while previously communication materials and interactions were mostly stored on individual PCs or platforms like Slack or Teams, now AI agents can summarize these records or send notifications. In other words, the cost and time associated with communication have been significantly reduced. As you know, it's now commonplace to, for example, connect an MCP, multi-channel publishing tool to Slack, as Dr. Kang demonstrated previously, to upload data, make announcements, and send notifications all at once. So the reduction in communication costs is a natural consequence. Secondly, companies like Microsoft and Google now provide individual agents to everyone. For instance, teams can send pre-meeting reminders to managers or summarize emails. This means tasks previously done by team members, like creating one-page summaries or reminders, are either being eliminated or made more efficient. Things are changing very rapidly.
In that case, the time available for fake work diminishes, doesn't it?
Actually, fake work, in a way, could be seen as a kind of human breathing room within an organization. But as the pace of work gets much faster, there's less space for it. However, looking at it positively, it also means you can finish tasks, be balri, and move on to other things. So that's how I interpret it. When I give lectures, many people give me this feedback. You talk about such tiring things. You keep telling us to change and collaborate. Then I often reply, being tired is better than becoming obsolete. That's the kind of answer I give.
So, no place to hide, in other words, means having less breathing room. And looking at those who are effectively utilizing AI and personally embodying the role of AI-driven talent, it seems their productivity has increased tremendously in just a few years. What that means is people are managing their time in much smaller increments and doing a lot more work. So when someone is laid off, it means someone else is taking over that person's role. So it's not that AI is taking me away or sending me home, but rather that highly productive people using AI are now doing the work of 2 or 3 individuals. It means you either become obsolete or you get very tired.
In fact, looking at my personal productivity metrics, ChatGPT was released on November 28, 2022. Since then, by my rough calculation, my productivity has increased at least 3 to 5-fold. This is certainly partly due to collaboration with AI agents, but it's clear that this friend significantly helps in the way I work. So when I'm scheduling, brainstorming ideas or creating visualizations, I often feel like I'm working with an agent almost as a team. At home, I have about 4 or 5 laptops and around 4 monitors. I assign different tasks to each monitor. I have them working on separate things, and then I look from one to the other, constantly combining information, thinking and searching for materials. So while subscription fees do add up, productivity has definitely increased a lot. Now, with increased productivity, one should have more free time, but thankfully people keep giving me work, so the workload seems to be constantly increasing.
Well, work always tends to go to those who do a lot of it. But if you use AI effectively, you might be able to work hard without burning yourself out quite as much.
Previously, when I was working in an office, the thing I found most difficult was writing reports. These days, I feel less stressed about reports. Firstly, I don't really need to create perfectly polished reports for anyone. But secondly, AI agents are incredibly good at drafting them. As many of you may have seen, if you use the recently released AI slide feature from GenSpark, it creates really excellent PowerPoint presentations. It's quite surprising. GenSpark does require credits, but if you sign up now, you can get some free credits. If you use it, it creates amazing AI slides. For a long time, a well-known PPT generation tool was Gamma. Gamma was good at taking a block of text you pasted, using it as a prompt, and then linking images and creating a table of contents. GenSpark, on the other hand, is a bit better at structuring content and creates images that are contextually appropriate. An even bigger advantage is that it shows you the creation process. That's a huge strength, so GenSpark AI slides are very good. So I often use a combination. I really like Fellow AI, which director Kim Dok-jong introduced. Fellow AI is excellent at structuring content, and structuring itself doesn't cost anything with Pello. So I take the structured content from Pello and paste it into tools like GenSpark or Gamma. This way, the cost for them to structure it is lower.
You're a cherry picker then?
That's right. In the past, I had to create reports meticulously, step by step. Now AI generates good drafts. It's difficult to use them directly as is, but once the draft is made, I sometimes use parts of it for external lectures or presentations. Also, among the many things I do, there's data analysis. In the past, the barrier to entry for data analysis was very high. For example, you needed an understanding of statistics, an understanding of systems, and knowledge of commonly used programming languages like Python. But these days, the barrier to entry has become much lower. It's definitely different from the past. For programming languages, tools like Cursor, which Dr. Kang uses, are good. And Google's Colab, for instance, is almost like a dedicated module for data scientists. The left screen shows an interface modeled after Jupyter Notebook, and the right screen displays Gemini. So, you can prompt Gemini with what you want to analyze and paste it on the left side, and you can upload data directly. Like this, in the field of data science, many generative AI tools are already streamlining work. In the past, I used to do data pre-processing, crunch numbers, visualize, write code, and when troubleshooting Python, for example, it would show error codes. What I used to do was copy the Python error code, go to Google, and search through what others had posted about troubleshooting. Nowadays, with just a click, AI can often fix the troubleshooting issues directly. Tools like Cursor can do that, and if you ask AI like GPT or Gemini about things you were doing in Jupyter Notebook, they explain it very well. Recently, Demis Hassabis unveiled an algorithm, possibly referring to AlphaDev or a similar self-improving system. This is a system capable of self-improvement. Even in the data science domain, it develops code, corrects it, and defines problems on its own. It's incredibly fast. So because generative AI is making many aspects of analysis more efficient, my productivity has definitely increased significantly.
We've been discussing some rather complex topics. While many will understand, to put it more simply, when your computer breaks down, you frantically search Google, right? I got error B something something, what do I do? In the past, you'd search one by one, go into some blog, then another, and inevitably find advice like, try turning it off and on again. You'd sigh, then go to some forum to see if someone explained it better, even reading through all the comments. It was really difficult, but now you can just ask Gemini or ChatGPT and it tells you, do this and this, and it usually works. Everything gets fixed. What we've been discussing ultimately leads to the idea that AI will replace jobs. Some might say, I've heard that before, even 2 years ago. Are you saying the same thing again? That's why it's also mentioned in this book. The point is that being replaced by AI or needing to work with AI isn't some distant future scenario. Many of the necessary technologies already exist. If we utilize these well, there are already ways to work with AI right now, and these capabilities have been implemented through numerous technologies for quite some time. What existing technologies make this possible?
For example, I found this case quite interesting. If I wanted to buy stocks and ask myself, should I buy Tesla stock? In the past, I would have gone to NASDAQ to check current Tesla stock information. Then I would have gone to YouTube to watch analyses by financial analysts. And thirdly, I would have run my own data analysis. But nowadays, many people have implemented this using multi-agents. The first agent scrapes data from NASDAQ, the second searches and analyzes YouTube, and the third consolidates all that information, calculates probabilities, and reports back to me. If such systems exist, I would describe most past technologies as assistants. If they were helpers, then these agents are more like colleagues. When I give them a task, they understand the goal, use tools, and bring me the results. Of course, humans must still bear the ultimate responsibility, but I think these kinds of changes are happening. To give another brief example, from an HR perspective, I've been involved in recruitment. When recruiting, the most common question is, who should we hire? The first prerequisite is that you can't hire someone incompetent. You need to hire someone who seems likely to perform well. That's the number one goal of recruitment. So, when trying to pick someone who will perform well, what do you think is the most predictive indicator? Generally, in recruitment scenarios, the best indicator for predicting who will perform well, to use a more technical term, who will deliver high performance based on a comprehensive review of data and research, is cognitive ability. In other words, though it's not a precise expression, smarter, more intelligent individuals tend to perform the best. In a way, cognitive ability has long been the most predictive indicator of performance for knowledge workers. The reason I'm bringing this up is that another nickname for generative AI is cognitive machine or reasoning machine. For example, these AIs are often given IQ tests these days. Some data suggests that GPT-5's IQ could be around 157.
That's Mensa level.
Smarter than Mensa, actually. An IQ of 157 means, in terms of distribution, it's about 1 in 13,333 people. It's within the top 0.01%. You might have one or two such individuals in your organization, right? So it's a very intelligent entity. The reason I'm saying this is that in the past, hiring such intelligent individuals was very expensive. Because high cognitive ability leads to good performance, you had to hire smart people. But nowadays, an AI like the Gemini Pro we use is said to have an IQ of around 130. That's also very smart.
Higher than mine, I think.
The average human IQ is 100. So yes, it's smart, it's in the top 5%. That's why Ilya Sutskever, co-founder of OpenAI, once tweeted something to the effect of, "If you still feel that cognitive ability is an important quality or factor among human capabilities, the rest of your life might not be so great." This implies that cognitive aspects are already being replaced. Or rather, many areas of cognition are now being assisted by generative AI. So, from a technology perspective, it's fair to say that generative AI is taking over much of the thinking and cognitive load that we used to handle.
It seems AI might even formulate strategies now. So I was thinking what's ultimately left for humans is how to navigate interpersonal relationships. Is that all that remains?
But let me give you one example first. Since I often lecture CEOs, I sometimes pose a provocative question. Can AI replace you? Can AI replace a CEO? I introduce an experiment related to this. For you, reporter, how would you feel if an AI was your CEO?
I feel like it would be hard to communicate effectively.
You couldn't share a drink? Things like that would be difficult, right? But aren't there good aspects too?
On the positive side, it feels like it might be easier to approach them.
Yes, you could report more quickly, and some might say there are no emotional fluctuations. The reason I mention this is a rather famous experiment conducted by Cambridge University and a US manufacturing company on whether AI could replace a CEO. In the experiment, they had an AI act as the CEO of a manufacturing company and compete against a human CEO. The board of directors then judged who made more effective and efficient decisions. Interestingly, in business operation simulations, things like inventory management, price optimization, and operational aspects, AI performs overwhelmingly better. As you said, because there's data, it can find patterns and make decisions. But the interesting part is, it's arguably a game that's disadvantageous to humans. So considering that not all human decisions are based on past data and patterns, they introduced a condition, a black swan situation. When they gave the AI the variable of COVID-19 and asked it to make decisions, the AI, to use a colloquialism, made some bizarre decisions. And that's when humans started to shine. Ultimately, what I want to say is that one of the important qualities remaining for humans is the ability to interpret situations and to act with agility based on experience or by adapting to experience. That still seems to be the human domain. Therefore, AI is still a tool for augmentation, assisting human capabilities rather than a complete replacement.
You mentioned it as an augmentation tool. Your book also states that to become an employee who utilizes AI well, augmentation ability is paramount. So as you just described, we need to cultivate that ability.
That's correct. As I explained earlier, when many CEOs or HR managers asked me recently, what criteria should we use for hiring? I explained that cognitive ability is not as crucial as it used to be, and instead I introduced the concept of augmentation ability. Augmentation ability refers to the sum total of skills that enable one to perform work better by utilizing AI. Firstly, there's a difference in how one even perceives AI. Treating AI as a colleague, not just a tool, is number one. Sam Altman also mentioned this at a conference recently. I don't mean to belittle the word tool, but people who effectively use generative AI don't treat it merely as a tool or a search engine where they just want the output, the result. For example, they don't just say, "Tell me about Lee Joong-hak," and take the output. They see AI as a colleague with whom they communicate and collaborate. For instance, the moment you ask AI, "Let's learn about Lee Joong-hak together," you engage in an interaction. You understand the AI's response, give further feedback, communicate, ask questions, and get answers. If you perceive it as a tool, you simply give it prompts that demand only the result. An engineering professor called this lazy prompting. So lazy prompting is when you just paste a problem and say, "Get me the answer, search this, bring me the output I want." Viewing it as a colleague is different. You clearly explain the context, persona, situation, and desired output image. Then, when you get a response, you give further feedback, communicate, and work together to create the result. If you just see it as a tool, the outcomes are genuinely very different, based on experiments I'm currently conducting. Therefore, augmentation ability starts with a different perspective on how you view AI. Secondly, if you recognize AI as a colleague, you communicate with it differently, for instance, by asking a continuous series of follow-up questions. In fact, in a recent experiment I conducted, the group that significantly improved their abilities using AI naturally had a higher number of prompts. Why do I say naturally? Because those with fewer prompts always assume the AI's answer is correct. It's AI, so it must be right. Believing the AI's answer is correct, they don't ask further questions, they just use it. This finding is consistent with research from Anthropic. In contrast, those whose abilities improved would say things like, "But couldn't you be wrong? Can you think about it from a different perspective? How about we try creating it like this?" They prompt and then provide feedback on the results. I see this as somewhat similar to a prompt that was popular a while ago for generative AI, the wait prompt. If you write the single word wait, it's as if my wife suddenly said to me, "Honey, haven't you done something wrong?" All sorts of circuits would fire in my head. My actions over the past month, traces in Kakao Talk messages. I'd be thinking, what did I do wrong? And the whole month would flash before my eyes like a kaleidoscope. It's similar with computers. The moment you say wait, it's like it's asking itself, what did I do wrong? Should I reconsider? The reason I'm telling you this is that if you communicate with AI, give feedback, and ask it to rethink, the quality of the output definitely improves. So if you learn strategies on how to treat AI as a colleague and communicate with it effectively, your augmentation abilities are likely to increase, surprisingly.
It's very interesting that you mention attitude and perception. Usually when people think of attitude, specifically attitude towards AI, the first thing that probably comes to mind is, oh, do I need to speak to it politely?
That's correct. You absolutely should use honorifics.
That's the first thing that comes to mind. For a while, when leadership styles were changing and there was a call to shift from a vertical, top-down structure to a horizontal one, the old way was essentially, if you're told to do it, you just do it, or you do it because you were told to. The real intention was to change towards a direction where everyone could communicate and develop together through discussion. But when they said, let's change the vertical to horizontal, all that really changed initially was how people spoke, using polite language, adding honorifics like nim to names, and that was about it, wasn't it?
It's similar.
When working with AI, that superficial change isn't the important part either. Just like with junior colleagues, you need to explain the context, transparently communicate. This is why we are doing this task. This is our goal, and this is the direction we need to go. And then find solutions together. That's what a flat structure is about. You need to treat AI the same way.
That explanation is much better than what's in my book. Yes, that's correct.
As I keep listening, I wonder if people who are really good at their job should be like Confucius, continuously asking questions.
Questions are important, but how you communicate and give feedback to AI is also very crucial. The reason I say this is I explained that generative AI can replace cognition, and because of that, a common pattern emerging these days, which I call the dark side of generative AI, is a significant cognitive decline phenomenon. In layman's terms, people are becoming dumber. If you just give AI a problem and only want the answer, your problem-solving skills deteriorate. Research from Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon University shows this, and my own data analysis from last year also indicates that language comprehension skills decrease after using generative AI. Therefore, it's crucial to remember that humans still absolutely need to define and understand their own work.
If smartphones brought an era where we don't need to memorize things, it feels like AI is bringing an era where we don't need to think for simple ratio calculations or figuring out what should I do next. Mathematically, I sometimes still use paper and pen, and when I do, I feel so proud. Wow, I can actually calculate this, but these days I just give up and immediately use a calculator. So, things I used to do, like thinking through the relationships between A, B, C, and D to calculate or draw diagrams, I'm doing less and less and just delegating to AI.
That's cognitive decline, cognitive replacement, but I actually feel it's more of an opportunity for high performers, because for so-called average users, if they just use lazy prompts or prompt only for answers, as in the earlier example, their problem-solving skills and cognition will definitely decline. In the future, those who use AI wisely or feel they are collaborating with AI will first and foremost need to understand their own work. They need to know their job and have enough experience to give feedback. So I think it's actually an opportunity. Looking at a recent study from the University of Mississippi related to cognitive decline, I feel there's a very classic answer there. The study talks about discussion and reading. It sounds quite old-fashioned, doesn't it? But nowadays, when I look at my students, or even middle and elementary school students, what really concerns me is that instead of reading books and pondering, they give problems to AI and get answers quickly. Solving quick problems with short bursts of effort is fine, but my thinking ability and depth of thought decline. That's why I say the importance of books and face-to-face discussions has become even more crucial these days. For example, a team leader who attends my graduate school recently told me, AI works so well these days, isn't it hard to evaluate performance? He then smiled and said, it is difficult. It's hard if you only look at reports. So nowadays, when I go into meetings, I close my laptop and bring an A4 sheet of paper. Let's draw and talk. He says that then, their true abilities become clear. If I compare this with some research, Microsoft's Work Trend Index shows a prevalent phenomenon of overconfidence these days. Because when individuals solve problems, if they actually solve them in collaboration with AI, they don't accurately know their own contribution, how much they were involved in solving it. When working with AI, performance keeps improving, so individuals tend to think, my abilities have improved, so I did this work better. It's a bit like unfounded confidence, overconfidence. So what leaders are saying these days is, to use a more technical term, develop their metacognition, or give very straightforward feedback so they can accurately understand their abilities. All of this sums up the changes in working styles brought about by AI, and perhaps for those who are good at their jobs, who read, discuss, and genuinely contemplate their work, even more opportunities are arising. Lately, I personally feel that even though I use AI a lot, I now intentionally turn it off more often, read books, stare blankly, and make an effort to draw on paper or write a lot on a whiteboard. If I don't, I feel my ability to think and reason diminishes. Conversations with AI are how should I put it? They are simple, context-free exchanges that leave no room for my own thought. There's no space for me to engage, communicate back and forth, and develop my thoughts. It's clean cut. That's why, paradoxically, the value of meeting people, communicating, and reading books has become even more important these days.
It's also mentioned that conversations with people, things like that empathy, will become extremely important.
Yes, the reason I focused on empathy as a keyword is that one day, a company commissioned me for data analysis consulting, and among their data was 15 years worth of information on empathy. Interestingly, when we talk about empathy, it's divided into cognitive empathy and emotional empathy. Cognitive empathy is simply an interest in others. For example, thinking, the reporter seems to like grey jackets, or perhaps they prefer grey. This understanding and interest in others is cognitive empathy. Emotional empathy, on the other hand, is feeling from the other person's perspective, like, our reporter looks a bit tired today. Did they have a rough day yesterday? Was childcare difficult?
So you're an F-type?
Yes, an F-type. People high in F are said to have high emotional empathy. These two are usually combined to define overall empathy. Surprisingly, or interestingly, the empathy levels of Korean office workers and job seekers have been declining like this over the past 15 years. My own interpretation of why did it drop was partly inspired by the book The Anxious Generation. The book mentions that one of the reasons for the rapid increase in suicide rates among American teenagers was the heavy use of social networks. Simply put, the images of people we see on social networks are always their best, most impressive selves. On Instagram, if I just woke up, I wouldn't post that, right? People show their optimal, happy-looking selves, the image they want others to see.
They even use a filter.
It's such an optimized image that teenagers don't realize. They compare and evaluate themselves, thinking, why am I not this happy? Why don't I look like that? And fall into depression, sometimes leading to suicide. The reason I'm saying this is that digital devices, seem to have played a very large role in the decline of empathy. As communication, conversation, expression, comparison, and evaluation continuously happen in digital spaces, there's less need to empathize with others. Secondly, there's less need to be interested in others. One might say clicking around to view things is a form of interest, but it's more of a consumptive interest. It's not genuine interest in a person, what they like, what they're good at, but rather a comparative evaluation or following trends like what's popular. Ultimately, in a situation where empathy is already declining, AI seems likely to accelerate that trend further. That's why interaction between humans is important. And secondly, if we ask, among human abilities, what remains important? And the answer is still empathy, then training or even just a focused interest in enhancing that empathy will be necessary.